Good evening, everyone. I'm Jane Conrad. I'm chair of the Town Select Board, and I'm very glad to see you here and the people on Zoom. Water quality emerged as an issue of concern to our community when we surveyed people for the comprehensive plan. And so this is the first in a series of discussions about water quality. Tonight's will focus on drinking water, which for all of us comes from our wells. As you know, we don't have municipal water in St. George, so it's mostly up to us to make sure that our water quality is safe. And the next talk will be in the fall, and we'll focus on ocean water quality, the river, and so you'll want to stay tuned for that. Before I introduce our speakers, can I just make sure that people on Zoom can hear and we're good? Can somebody give us a thumbs up or something? Okay, thank you, Leo. And thank you, Bill Batty and Aaron Dent, for our AV and Zoom support. And you can also know that this recording will be posted on the town's YouTube channel. I've been amazed at the number of people who watch the programs and the board meetings that are posted there. So that's good. So our speakers tonight are David Tortora, who's from RCAP Solutions in Portland, and I attended a talk he did maybe in the fall and was so impressed that I thought he should basically do the same presentation for all of us. He's going to be with us via Zoom with his slides. And Sarah Oktay, who is the executive director at Herring Gut, and most of us know her from her role there, and she has a PhD in oceanography, but I learned during all of our water discussions before that has deep knowledge and expertise in chemistry and water. So she'll tell us about that. So David, I'll let you start and tell us about your organization and the importance of taking care of our own water quality. And if people, each of the speakers can let us know if you want people to hold questions or ask questions as we go. And Aaron, you'll help watch for Zoom questions, right? Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for that introduction. Everybody can hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can't see the chat. I'm working off a single monitor right now. So if you want to just go ahead and type your questions into the chat when I'm done speaking, I'll go ahead and just type you back some responses. And if you've got more detailed questions, I'll leave my email up and you can send me a message or schedule an appointment. Unfortunately, I have to run right after I'm done with my portion, so I'm not going to be able to stick around and answer questions beyond typing messages in the chat or giving you my email to correspond with me later. But yeah, with that being said, I'm going to give you guys a little walkthrough on private wells. Let me click through. So I work with RCAP Solutions, which that stands for Rural Community Assistance Partnership. And we're part of a nationwide network of technical assistance providers who offer assistance to rural communities and tribes related to drinking water and wastewater issues. I would say most of our work pertains to public utilities, but we do assist with a certain amount of private well issues as well, which is why I'm here speaking with you all today. So I've got this graphic up. This is our Northeast New England, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands kind of regional statistics for our group. And you're probably most interested in that statistic down below where in 2024, I haven't updated this graphic yet, we conducted 52 evaluations of private wells, including 42 quality checks with laboratory tests. I have done 10 so far this year, and I'm sure my colleagues have done a handful as well. And additionally, worth mentioning, if there is a probable cause to suspect PFAS in your well, we do have limited funding for that as well. So that's something, if you're interested in, maybe you send me an email at the end of this meeting. So getting into the actual meat of the presentation, we're talking about water well emergencies. Private wells are incredibly reliable until they're not. Unlike public water systems, when something goes wrong with a private well, there's no utility to call and no automatic backup. So today we're going to talk about the most common ways wells fail and why planning ahead matters. One of the most immediate issues well owners face is an extended power outage. Most private wells rely entirely on electricity to operate. So when the power goes out, water usually does too. Even if a well that's in perfect condition won't produce water without power. The next most common failure we see are mechanical failures. Wells depend on several mechanical components, including pumps, pressure tanks, wiring, and control systems. These parts can wear out over time or fail suddenly, often without warning. And repairs usually require a licensed professional, and the cost can be extremely high, especially during an emergency. So after these big two, we can see that wells go dry, either temporarily or permanently. This can happen because of a drought, seasonal changes in the water table, increased water usage, or a nearby development and changes in their pumping. Sometimes you'll get early warning signs like sputtering faucets or reduced flow, but other times the loss of water is sudden. On the opposite side of a dry well, a flooded well presents a different but equally serious risk. Floodwaters submerge wellheads or allow contaminated surface water to enter the well. Even if the well looks clear afterward, it may no longer be safe to drink. Flooded wells often require testing, disinfection, and sometimes repairs before they can be used again. So then we also see a loss of water pressure or no water flow at all. These can signal several underlying problems, including pump issues, pressure tank failures, leaks, or electrical problems. Even a partial loss of water can make a well unusable for basic household needs and is often an early warning sign that shouldn't be ignored. Finally, wells can become compromised or contaminated in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Contamination can come from flooding, failing septic systems, agricultural runoff, surface spills, or poor well construction and maintenance. Many contaminants can't be seen, smelled, or tasted, which is why regular water testing is so important, especially after emergencies or noticeable changes in your water quality. Any one of these issues can disrupt daily life, but during disasters or prolonged emergencies, they can quickly cascade into larger problems. The good news is that many of these risks can be reduced with better awareness, routine maintenance, and emergency planning. So up here, this slide sets the stage for thinking about private wells through an emergency management lens. Emergencies don't just happen suddenly. Many are preventable, and almost all are easier to manage if you're prepared. So we're going to look at both the preventative measures and the preparedness measures that reduce risk, protect health, and minimize downtime when something goes wrong. So getting into our preventative measures first, the first thing you can do is test your well. Regular water testing is one of the most important preventative actions for private well owners because private wells are not regulated like public water systems. Testing is often the only way to identify contamination issues early before there's a health impact on your system or a system failure. The EPA and the Maine State Drinking Water Program recommend that wells be tested at least once a year for basic water quality indicators, including total coliform bacteria, nitrates, total dissolved solids, and pH. So this isn't legally required, but it is a best practice recommendation to help protect health and detect problems early. And the Maine State Drinking Water Program recommends more comprehensive testing every 3 to 5 years for things like arsenic, copper, lead, iron, radon, and other chemicals of concern to your specific area. And those more comprehensive ones, those are included in the well testing that my group provides to homeowners. So the next preventative measure we're working with is practicing water conservation. This one's not just about saving water, it's about protecting the well system. Overpumping can stress aquifers, reduce well yield, and contribute to pump failure. For well owners, conservation help extends the life of the well and pump. And for professionals, it's a reminder that demand management is part of long-term well sustainability, especially in drought-prone or high-use areas. So moving on to our next two preventative measures, we'll start with protecting your wellhead. This is a critical point of vulnerability. Simple actions like keeping the area clear of chemicals, ensuring proper grading and drainage, and maintaining a secure sanitary cap can prevent contamination from surface sources. Many contamination events we see are linked to poor wellhead protection, not deep groundwater problems. This is a key area where education and routine inspections make a big difference. And so someone, when we were setting this up, mentioned that there was an issue with a certain number of old abandoned wells that were no longer active. That's a really important thing to address. Typically, you want a driller to remove those or backfill them with gravel. Otherwise, that's a really easy channel for contamination to enter the groundwater table. So you'll see in the picture on the right up here, we've got an image of a well that has conduit that pulled away from the cover, along with a mouse nest that's in the well casing. It also appears to have an old cover which is not vented properly. And this carries us on to our next preventative measure, replacing old and outdated equipment. Aging pumps, wiring, pressure tanks, and well caps are common failure points during emergencies. You might think you're saving money by making do with what you have, but replacing outdated equipment before it fails can prevent sudden loss of water or more costly damage. For stakeholders and professionals, this really highlights the importance of asset management and helping well owners plan for replacement before an emergency. So if you have a contractor who comes out and tells you that old rusty well cap you have on top of your well needs to be replaced, they're not trying to upsell you on something. They really are trying to sell you an essential feature to keeping your water source clean and functioning. All right, so this slide here, I'll help you interpret these images. It builds directly on what we talked about with the wellhead protection and the importance of maintaining or upgrading those aging components. Dug wells, especially older ones constructed with concrete tiles, are particularly vulnerable if joints are not properly sealed or if materials have shifted over time. In the photo on the right, you can see that we've got some roots that are intruding into the well through a crack there. Those don't just indicate a physical breach, they also signal that surface water, soil, and potentially bacteria or other contaminants can enter the well through those same openings. And then in the photo on the left, there's a frog inside the well sitting right at the joint between two well tiles. And this may seem unusual or even amusing at first, but it's a strong visual indicator of a serious wellhead protection issue. If a frog can enter the well, so can insects, surface water, and microbial contamination. So these two photos are just good examples of why replacing or upgrading outdated well components can be just as important as routine maintenance. During a well assessment, issues like these can often be identified early before they result in water quality problems or health impacts. Proper sealing, structural repairs, or in some cases, transitioning to a more modern well design can significantly reduce risk and improve long-term water safety. So that about covers up our preventative measures. These are the things that reduce the likelihood of problems occurring in the first place. Now we're going to shift into our preparedness measures, which focus on things you want to have in place when an emergency does happen. So, like we talked about earlier, power outages are one of the most common and immediate emergencies for private well owners. This is why backup power is such an important preparedness measure for well owners. Having a generator can be the difference between maintaining access to water and having none at all during an outage. There are generally two types of generator options to consider: whole house and portable generators. Whole house generators, permanently installed, they automatically turn on during outages, and they can power the entire well system along with many other household needs. Downsides, they tend to be a bit more expensive, but they do offer the highest level of reliability and ease of use. And then on the more budget-friendly option, we've got portable generators. They're not only more affordable, but they're also more flexible, but they do require manual setup and careful operation. Well owners need to ensure that, one, the generator is properly sized to run the well pump, and also that it's connected safely, often through a transfer switch, and operated according to manufacturer and safety guidelines. This is really an opportunity to think about realistic backup power operations that match your well system, your budget, and the risk level you're willing to tolerate. This isn't going to eliminate emergencies, but it will significantly reduce disruption and increase resilience when outages do occur. So even with good preventative measures and backup power, we still see situations where a private well may be unusable due to contamination, mechanical failure, flooding, or prolonged outages. That's why having a backup water supply is a core preparedness measure for private well owners. The images on this slide show several common backup water options, starting with bottled water. Bottled water is often the easiest and most familiar option, and it can be critical for short-term drinking and food preparation needs. However, it's important to remember that bottled water supplies, they're going to run out quickly during widespread emergencies. So you need to stock up on this early, and keep in mind that relying on this alone might not be enough. The EPA's recommends a minimum 3-day supply of water per person, with 1 gallon being the minimum daily recommendation per person per day. So what this means is that a family of 4 requires at least 12 gallons of water on hand. And then the CDC suggests storing up to 2 weeks of water in your home if space allows. So yeah, if you're doing the math, you're figuring out this is a lot of bottled water to have in your home, which is why water storage containers are an important preparedness tool. Storing water ahead of time, using food grade containers that allow households to maintain a supply for drinking, cooking, and basic hygiene are a great option. I've got a couple of those photos in here, and stored water should be rotated periodically and kept in cool, clean location to maintain the quality. Rain barrels play a role as well, particularly for non-potable water, for things like flushing toilets, cleaning your home, or watering animals. It is important to note that rainwater is not considered safe to drink without treatment, but it can significantly reduce pressure on limited potable water supplies during an emergency. Portable water treatment as well, which I've got a photo of that in the bottom right. Things like, this is a pretty high tech one that I've got here, but things like simple filters or disinfection tablets provide additional flexibility. These tools allow well owners to treat alternative water sources or address certain contamination concerns temporarily. However, treatment methods vary in effectiveness, so it's really important to understand what a device or technology can treat before you trust it entirely. So another critical preparedness measure for private well owners is having clear disinfection instructions and the necessary supplies on hand before an emergency occurs. After events like flooding, well repairs, power outages, or confirmed bacterial contamination, wells often need to be disinfected before the water can be safely used again. Disinfection is time sensitive, and during emergencies, it can be difficult to find reliable instructions or purchase supplies quickly. So, having step by step guidance available ahead of time helps reduce confusion and prevents unsafe shortcuts. It also helps ensure that disinfection is done correctly, using the right concentration, contact time, and flushing procedures. Supplies typically include things like unscented household bleach, measuring tools, and protective gloves, along with those clear written instructions specific to the type of well you have. And it's important to note that disinfection is not a fix-all solution. It can address bacterial contamination, but it doesn't remove chemicals, metals, or other contaminants, which is why follow-up water testing is so important. The Maine drinking water program, they have a great new website, and they've got some really clear guidelines there on shocking their well, which if you get me your email or someone else at the meeting gets your email to me, I can send you that along with some of their other frequently asked questions and resources that they provided me at the last training I went to. And I'll send those over to you in the next week or two. So, along with technical preparedness, logistical preparedness is just as important. Having a contractor call list, it might feel like a simple thing, but it will significantly reduce downtime during a well emergency. When something goes wrong with a private well, repairs often require a licensed or experienced professional, such as well drillers, pump installers, electricians, or water treatment specialists. During widespread emergencies, these contractors may be difficult to reach and delays are common. Encouraging well owners to identify and document who to call ahead of time, along with phone numbers, service areas, and after hours options, can save valuable time and reduce stress during an emergency. This list might also include local health departments, extension services, or water testing laboratories. From a preparedness perspective, this reinforces the idea that emergency response doesn't start when the water stops flowing. It starts with planning and relationship building ahead of time. Helping connect well owners with qualified service providers is an important part of strengthening overall private well resilience. So I'm going to put this slide up here. This is just our one-page reminder of what we've covered so far. On the left, we've got our preventative measures, things you can do now to reduce the likelihood of problems in the future and keep your wells safe and reliable. And then on the right, we've got our preparedness measures. These are the things that you can take care of so you're ready if an emergency does happen. Some of these, like backup power and water supply, are critical during outages or contamination events. Other things like disinfection supplies or a contractor call list make responding faster and safer. And so together, all of these measures give well owners the best chance of avoiding serious problems or at least managing them quickly if they do occur. And so now that we've covered both preventative measures and preparedness measures for private well owners, we're going to consider some specific scenarios here where these measures are critical. So one of the most common and potentially serious threats to private wells is flooding. Floods can happen quickly and they can introduce contaminants into wells, damage equipment, and they can make water unsafe to use. Understanding the risks, what to look for, and how to respond is an essential part of being a well-prepared well owner. Taking a closer look at how flooding affects wells and what steps you can take before, during, and after a flood is important here. So your immediate safety actions. After that flood, the first and most important thing is safety. If the well has been submerged or exposed to floodwater, you should immediately turn off power to the pump to prevent electrical hazards and avoid pumping contaminated water into the home. Protecting the wellhead is the next step. This can be as simple as wrapping the wellhead in a plastic bag to prevent debris from entering, or in some cases, temporarily extending the well casing to keep floodwater out. These actions are quick, simple, and they can prevent further contamination. And then once the immediate safety measures are taken, we're going to move on to assessing the well and thinking about recovery. You're going to want to inspect the well for damage, check the pump, the pressure tank, piping, and the wellhead for signs of mechanical failure, sediment intrusion, or structural damage. After inspection, the well should be disinfected following proper instructions and using the right supplies. This step is crucial to ensure that bacterial contamination from floodwaters is eliminated. And then finally, don't use the well water until it's been sampled and tested by a certified laboratory. This step confirms that the water is safe to drink and use. Keep that contractor list handy like we talked about, because if there's any damage or uncertainty, a licensed professional can make repairs or help with post-flood recovery. Following these steps, safety, inspection, disinfection, testing, that all aligns perfectly with the preventative and preparedness measures we just discussed. Floods are unpredictable, but being prepared for them allows well owners to respond quickly, protect health, and minimize downtime. So floods are one type of emergency, but mechanical failures are another major cause of well downtime. And many of these issues can be prevented with basic knowledge and routine maintenance. Owners should understand the layout of their well and water system, including the pump, pressure tank, piping, and well casing. Regular inspections of both the well and associated equipment are critical. Over time, pumps wear out, pressure tanks fail, and pipes corrode. Catching these issues early through inspection reduces the risk of a sudden failure. Preemptive replacement of outdated equipment is often less costly and less stressful than waiting for an emergency. So the photo that we've got up here on the slide shows a new pump next to an old one, highlighting how worn out equipment can look and why timely replacement matters. And then the illustration shows proper placement of a submersible pump in the screen section of the well casing, which is critical for efficient operation and longevity. And then finally, as we emphasized before, that contractor list is critical. Even with the best preventative maintenance, some mechanical failures require professional repair. So having a trusted service provider ready to call reduces downtime and stress. In short, knowing your system, inspecting it regularly, replacing aging components, and having expert help available are all steps that connect directly to preventative and preparedness measures we discussed earlier. Mechanical failures don't have to turn into emergencies if you plan ahead. This one I've got up here, I took this class a few years ago, and it's wonderful for well owners or stakeholders who want to dive deeper into private well management. You can access this website. It's an excellent resource. It's set up as a 10-week email course where you'll receive one lesson per week. Each lesson is about 2 pages long. It covers a specific topic in more detail than I can cover in a single session here. And then in addition to those email lessons, they put on regular webinars that address practical issues for private well owners. So maybe you see something that pertains to your well that we didn't have time to cover today. You can sign up for that class and attend a live webinar like this one. Up here, I've got another valuable resource for private well owners, and this is the RCAP Private Well Program, which is funded by the EPA. RCAP operates nationally through 6 regional affiliates providing education and outreach like this, as well as technical support for private well owners and stakeholders. The program offers workshops and trainings at no cost. And like I mentioned, we also offer on-site well assessments at no cost. These assessments are an excellent way to identify potential issues, review preventative measures, and get guidance on maintenance and upgrades. And it's important to note that for these well assessments, that capacity is limited. It's generally offered on first come, first served basis with priority given to low income households. So while the service is free, scheduling early and understanding the program's capacity constraints is important for those who want to take advantage of it. RCAP's on-site well assessments are a key component of their support for private well owners. These assessments start with a sanitary survey, which is offered at no cost. The survey allows a trained professional to look at the well and the associated water systems and components to identify any conditions that could potentially pose risks. We're looking for potential vulnerabilities and, of course, opportunities for improvement. We don't open well caps as part of this survey, but we do offer water quality laboratory testing at no cost to homeowners, so well owners can see the results of the assessment and testing, and then you can take action as needed and work with the contractor to make the corrective changes required. So yeah, these assessments tie back directly to those preparations that we were discussing earlier. While education and routine maintenance are essential, having a professional on site to identify risks and provide targeted recommendations ensures that well owners are taking the right steps to protect their water and respond effectively to emergencies. As mentioned earlier, capacity for these assessments is limited, first come, first serve. So it's important to reach out early if you want to take advantage of this program. Here's one more resource for you. This is the USDA 504 Repair Loan and Grant Program. This program offers low interest loans and grants to eligible homeowners to help pay for home repairs and improvements, including water wells and septic systems. There are some qualifications. You must be the homeowner and occupy the house, and you must not be able to obtain affordable credit elsewhere, and you need to have a household income that does not exceed the very low limit by county. And to qualify for the grants, you must meet this criteria and be age 62 or older. So I can potentially share these slides after the meeting is done. There's a link in here, or you can just take notes and search up this 504 Repair Loan USDA and get all those details laid out for you. So linking this to our earlier discussion, this program allows well owners to act on recommendations from those assessments and the preventative maintenance checks without any financial stress. For example, if a pump needs replacement or a pressure tank is failing, or some other problem that we've identified during the assessment, this USDA 504 program has the potential to help cover the cost of those repairs. In addition to USDA funding, RCAP also offers an individual household well and septic program. This program provides low interest loans, just 1% to eligible low to moderate homeowners to repair, replace, or install individual household wells or septic systems. These loans can be up to $15,000 with terms of up to 10 years, making them accessible for homeowners who need to act on issues identified during an assessment or to maintain their well and septic system proactively. These are modest fees associated with the loan, which are detailed on the program website. Again, if anyone's interested, I can share this link or I can share the slides in their entirety, and you can find all of these details about the eligibility requirements online. So winding down with my portion of the presentation here, it's really important for me to mention the guidance provided by the Maine CDC and the Maine Drinking Water Program for private well owners. As stated at the beginning, unlike public water systems, private wells are not regulated by state or federal drinking water rules, which means the responsibility for testing and treating your water falls entirely on you as the homeowner. Testing your well regularly is one of the most important things you can do to protect health and detect problems early. The Maine CDC recommends that well owners test at least once a year for basic health-related parameters like total coliform bacteria, E. coli, and nitrates, and then more comprehensive testing for chemicals such as arsenic, fluoride, lead, radon, and uranium. That's recommended every 3 to 5 years, and it's also best practice to use an accredited laboratory for your samples whenever possible. Accredited laboratories follow recognized quality control practices, and you can find a list of those labs online. So yeah, highly encourage you to check out the Maine Drinking Water Program private well owner page if you have any questions. So in addition to testing guidance, Maine CDC also offers technical assistance to private well owners. You can get help with sampling procedures, understanding what to test for, interpreting your results, choosing treatment options, and discussing potential threats to your well. This assistance is a public service so that you are not alone when it comes to managing your water quality. So that just about wraps up everything I've got to say. If anybody has any quick comments, I can answer them before we pass off the stage to our next speaker. But otherwise, I'll hang out for, I don't know, about 10 or 15 minutes in the chat, answer any questions that I see come up in there. But otherwise, yeah, here's my email and phone number. I would say a quick email message is probably the best way to initially make contact with me, and then I'll follow up with a phone call as needed. So yeah, thanks for your time tonight, and I will stop sharing my screen now and pass off the stage.
Do people have any questions for David? Yes.
I wondered if he could address the issue of radon in well waters.
Yes.
He mentioned testing only at 3 to 5 years, but
Right.
kind of a big
And Sarah Oktay, who's our next speaker, will be talking specifically about some of the issues that we have in St. George. A number of us shared our well test results with her from different parts of town, so she could talk about that. But David, I don't know if you heard the question was about radon, which is an issue in our area.
Yeah, I did not hear that question specifically, but radon is pretty common in different areas. It's naturally occurring. It's in the bedrock, And so that does require a special treatment system that a lot of contractors are very familiar with. And from my experience, it tends to be one of the lower maintenance ones. So it's a health risk, but it's one that we've studied for a while, and it's like got pretty good management strategies in place for it.
Did you have a question? What is the expected life expectancy of a well pump?
Oh, it kind of depends how much people use it, how many people are in the home. I think it's generally one of those things that the way they're manufactured now, they're good for about 15 to 20 years, and then you might want to check on it. But I've seen some that are running well for up to 50 years. So if it's not failing, that is something that people just like to put way past their useful life.
Yes.
I had a question about well casings. I have a well that's probably 80 years old and wanted to know if well casings fail.
Well casings and failures in well casings, is that a predictable thing? Is there a predictable life expectancy for those?
So that's the kind of thing during the assessment, we'd come out and look at it. We'd figure out, well, what material the well casing is made out of. Some are more susceptible to failure than others. And then we'd also look at things like, is it a bedrock well? Because with bedrock wells, they're drilling into bedrock, and oftentimes they're not putting casing into the ground. So there's nothing to fail where the actual water is coming from. But without knowing the material of your well casing, I can't really speak to how long it's expected to last.
Yes, Janine.
Hi. Is there any requirements to report the test results of water testing to the state of Maine Health Department or any county health department?
No requirements. I think the only time it's required is during real estate transactions. I'm not too familiar with that. But there are certain things, like if there's an outbreak, it sounds like maybe a lot of you have similar well issues, then they might want to do some kind of study of that, but no requirements that I know of.
Yes, question.
I'll play by the rules. We've submitted our well water to the state to have it tested in the past. I'm just wondering if there are commercial alternatives to using the state that Dave might recommend.
Great. I tend to go with A&L Laboratories. They're based in Lewiston, and they have drop-off locations throughout the state. So yeah, that's who I tend to work with. But I've also used the state lab as well, and they're comparable costs and speed to get those results back to you.
And a number of us have used Haskell. That's a local well company. One other thing I did say earlier that we don't have municipal water here, and as you know, we do have two quasi-municipal water systems, one in the village of Tennants Harbor, one in the village of Port Clyde. Each of those have about 125 households connected to them. But, most of us in St. George don't have that. I assume you probably wouldn't be here if you were on one of those, because those districts do test their water regularly and are responsible for treating their water. So the users of those systems don't have the issues that we're talking about now. And it was interesting, Janine's question about, are you obligated to share your water quality results with the state? Because when at the select board, we talked about what can the town do to be a resource to private well owners and encourage people to test their own water and make sure their water quality is safe. And we talked about having some people get their water tested and share it so that we could know whether there were issues in certain parts of town, and we could at least share that with people. But there was enough of a concern that people didn't really want anybody to know. And even those of us, a handful of us from different parts of town, shared our results with Sarah so that she could generalize about issues. People are like, okay, but don't tell anybody that's my house. So, so we will be posting this recording, but also on the website, we'll put these resources like the Maine drinking water resources and CDC information, the septic information, so that we can all find that. And so now we'll turn it over to Sarah to talk to us more specifically about St. George drinking water. Thank you, David.
And I do need a box to stand on. I'm always a type of person that needs that, and I will turn on my video. No, I think this is fine. I mean, you guys know what I look like. And actually, I might not worry about having, well, let's see. No, I there we go. Now, so people can see me from multiple angles. And thank you so much for being here, Dave. That was an excellent talk. I really appreciated it. A little bit about myself. I'm a chemical oceanographer, so I study the chemistry of the ocean. So always when you hear the word oceanographer, you go straight to marine biologist or the people that everyone finds the most exciting. But all the work I've done over the last 30 years is in rivers, groundwaters, surface waters like lakes and ponds, and coastal areas like bays. I've done work in New York Harbor, had some involvement in Flint, Michigan, and have studied groundwater all over the place. So to understand what's happening in the ocean, you have to understand what's happening in the surface water and rainwater and how the inputs get into the ocean and affect all of us. So I'm going to give a short, hopefully it feels short, talk for everyone about just basic pollutants, and then we'll get into the details about our wells. So I'll probably scare the poop out of everyone to begin with, and then you'll be super excited to see really how great our water is and what, we aren't dealing with situations like people are in large municipalities or folks that are near airports or things like that. So I'll go relatively quickly, but if you can we can interrupt me as I'm going, or we can save questions to the end. I'm easy either way. Can everyone hear me?
The town has a YouTube,
Okay.
a way to see this again on YouTube.
Yes,
Oh.
I'm going to give my entire,
Hey, we really should be getting our water tested every year. And it says
I'm going to mute Barbara. Okay. So, and that is one of the many things I'll be telling you about. So where does our groundwater come from? Well, most of the water on the planet is actually salt water. So you can see that 96.5% plus this 0.9% of all the water on the planet is actually salt water. And you can ask anyone who's had to desalinate to have fresh water how important that is. Only 2.5% of the water on the planet is fresh water, and of that, 30% of that is in the groundwater. So it's really important to protect the groundwater, not only for us drinking that groundwater, but for the entire planet. So here's some common issues in well water, and they can be anything from the traces of fertilizers and pesticides that we put on our lawns to chemicals of emerging concern, and I'll talk about PFAS very briefly later on. Heavy metals, which I started my career with, lead, arsenic, and mercury, measuring that in our lakes and ponds. And, we all grew up worrying about these things, mainly from atmospheric pollution. Trace metals are things like iron and zinc and copper and manganese. These are things in smaller quantities that can still cause health problems. We've also got macro nutrients that we'll talk about: sodium, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Those are things that we need every day in our bodies, but too much of it can really cause a problem. And as I talk about these, I'll also differentiate between things that could hurt a child, someone that's of childbearing age versus someone who's older. You have to think about who is actually drinking the water. I've actually found hospital waste in New York Harbor and different pharmaceuticals. You can measure things like Tylenol or all kinds of anti-epileptics, Rogaine, all kinds of things in almost every body of water on the world. Common contaminants include nitrogen and other contaminants from septic systems. So anyone that lives in a rural area has to deal with the fact that you want your water well far away from your septic system, and you want your septic system to work properly. You would be shocked in areas in the Cape and the islands how many times people are poisoning themselves with their own septic. And everything you eat and drink goes into, not everything, but most everything goes into your septic. So that Tylenol got into our waterways from us. It wasn't from people dumping Tylenol directly into the water. So we're all a big system, and we have to think about that. Another common thing, especially in parts of New England, is salt from the ocean itself or road salt. Bacteria, Dave did a good job talking about bacteria. I'll mention it very briefly. That happens in stagnant or unused wells. Organic contaminants like gasoline and runoff from roads. When you think about it, after a heavy rain, if people have been driving on the roads for a long time, after a heavy rain, you're going to get a huge slug of gasoline runoff off of impervious systems. And then radionuclides from bedrock, which is a common problem, unfortunately, here in Maine. So I'll do a couple of quick things to see, so you'd see what groundwater looks like. You've got water coming in from, rain. You've got streams. Streams and any kind of open fresh water you see is just an expression of the water table at the surface. So that tells you exactly where the water table is. When you put a pumping well into the ground, you actually start bringing that water to that well. That's what you're trying to do. And depending on how much you pump, you're going to actually depress the water table a little bit around the pump. And in this case, there's a confining layer, and that would be something like clay, something that keeps the water from going anywhere else. So all of this area is saturated. Now, if only our areas were as simple as that drawing. We've also got the ocean, and the ocean has water, salt water, underneath the ground, and there is saline groundwater. And if you overpump too close to the ocean, you're going to draw some of that salt water towards your well, and in times of drought or in times of overpopulation, if you're overpumping it, then you can really push that salt water out. In many areas, though, the fresh water is so abundant, it actually works as a lens for both Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Fresh water actually goes into the ocean underground because it's such a large lens. So it can happen in both directions. Obviously, you'd want to be drinking from this fresh groundwater well over here. So there's a lot of geological impacts, and especially for us Mainers. So we're going to avoid a lot of the horrible pollutants that are coming from industry, but we are pumping our water through gneiss and schist and granite and limestone. So bedrock is a real big part of our lives here. So in Maine areas with heavy ledge and bedrock, groundwater behaves as a fractured rock aquifer, which is both good and bad. It doesn't exist in large flowing underground rivers, but rather fills and flows through these narrow joints and cracks and fractures. And it's going through igneous and metamorphic rock. So groundwater in many of our areas, fortunately, is relatively shallow, but the average depth of wells is anywhere from 250 to 350 feet in Maine. So in comparison, for the Cape and Islands, groundwater might only be 6 feet down. And if you're really close to the ocean, it might only be 6 or 10 feet down. But that does not mean you only want your well to only be 6 or 10 feet deep. Unfortunately, because of this bedrock and you're sucking this fresh water from these cracks, our delivery time, these wells typically are low yield and sometimes low pressure wells, and they'll only have 3 to 6 gallons per minute versus wells in other areas that might be 10 gallons per minute. So you do need to drill deep for wells to intercept multiple fractures, and I'll show you a little cartoon of that. Clay layers, like I suspect I have in the back of Herring Gut, form a perched wetland. You'll see areas where you're like, why are there, reeds there? Why is there a wetland? And that's because there's a big layer of clay that's forming a pot that's holding that water. Underneath that clay is probably a dry zone, and then the saturated groundwater is beneath that. So lots of aquifers in Maine look like this, and you're going to have all these fractures, and hopefully you can see it, and you're going to want to drill your well so that you can actually get through several fractures and pull up fresh water. Some people have wells in gravel packed areas. Some people have short, shallow driven wells. The age of your well and where it was placed and how deep it is one of the most important things you can know. So humans have a lot of impacts on water. We have impact on pollution. We can divert the water. We can change the water level, or we can do things in our fresh water and our surface water like introduce invasive life. One of the things we do most frequently with water levels is we decrease the water table if we overpump. If we withdraw more from our bank than we have in there, it goes negative. That's the same for water that's in the ground. So if you overdraw, especially during times of drought, you can actually lower the water table. One thing that becomes really important with is planning, city planning, looking at growing populations and having in many areas some regulations if you have adding a lot of wells. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about this. I lived in California for 3 years where excess irrigation was incredibly abundant, and they drastically lowered their water table. Every single almond tree was using, like 400 gallons a day, 4 families worth per tree. You can see a drop in lake and stream levels, and if you overdraw, you're going to cause salt water to actually get pulled towards your well. So I'm going to quickly go through the next few slides. You guys will each get a chemistry degree at the end of this, but I am going to tell you where the pollutants come from because that helps you evaluate your water. Point source solution is water pollution that's coming from a source you can identify. Non-point source enters water from a large area of land, and you can't blame one source. And this next drawing actually will show, 2 drawings from now, will show some of these point source and non-point source. So you can have fertilizer, you can have planes, industry, landfills, smog, all of these can contribute. For us, something more likely would be roads, septic, and in some cases, a little bit of agriculture. So here you can see non-point source. So this would be nitrogen coming from the atmosphere or smog that then flows into the river, and there's not a single thing you can blame. A point source would be an obvious, like a factory or someone that's, like a paper mill is obviously putting something into the system. Your septic system would be a point source. This is a very involved picture, but it's just letting you know about all the sources. Me, as a chemist, if I came and looked at your well water or I measured your pond, I'd be literally seeing this picture in my head of all the possible sources. I would want to know who are the culprits. It's kind of like solving a mystery. If someone's dead, there's, might be 12 people that caused it. So in this case, the pollution is showing that it can come from lots of different sources, and it helps to understand those sources. We're not going to get in detail about it today. Clean Water Act is helping all of us live much longer lives. Passed in 1972. It ensures that we have clean surface water and clean drinking water, and it's one of the things behind the EPA's ability to set standards for our drinking water. We'll be talking about those standards. Some different pollutants, things that cause disease, things like bacteria or viruses, things that actually just having like that dead mouse would be something called oxygen demanding waste, something that falls into the water that demands oxygen in order to break down. Water soluble in inorganic chemicals, these are acids and salts and things like trace metals. These can make water unfit to drink. These can affect growing minds and growing bodies, and it can also affect the machinery and pumps in the water. Inorganic plant nutrients, this is like nitrates and phosphates. This is the fertilizers you're putting on your lawn. In some areas in the country, the fertilizers reach the groundwater within 48 hours. For us, it would take much longer. Organic chemicals, and this has been in the news a lot. Things like gasoline, plastics, cleaning solvents, detergents. You can measure all of that in most surface water areas. And the sources of these can include transportation, urban activities, household cleaning, or industry. One of the programs we do at Herring Gut is measure plastics and microplastics, and we do it over in Allen Island, and we do it at Drift Inn Beach. And just about a 5-minute tow for phytoplankton is going to come up with some microplastics. 1 scoop, 2 scoops from the sand put through a sieve with our students are going to find microplastics. It's actually quite alarming. And it's unfortunately in all of us. Thankfully, kids really care about this, and they're trying to remove the sources, the inputs. Another common problem is sediment. This is often the case with your wells. A lot of times you'll have them silting in. That is very common. That screen at the bottom can actually bring in silt. And sediment can also be a problem for freshwater and for ocean areas. The one thing that people are most scared about, for good reason, is something called contaminants of emerging concern, and that's things like PFAS, the BPAs that we've been trying to regulate, pharmaceuticals. All of these work in your body in pretty alarming ways, and they stay biologically active for a long time, and they can come from all kinds of sources, but typically they come from us. We'll talk about, I'll actually show you some data that you all can access. So when I share this, I have links to all of the Maine state records for things like PFAS, radon, that you can access and look in your own community. So this record right here is showing impervious surfaces here in St. George. And one of the things that you want to be concerned about for water quality is how much pavement is there around. And thankfully, we don't have a lot of pavement. If we were somewhere where there was a lot of pavement, like Portland, we'd have a lot more impacts onto our wells and our drinking water. So you can't quite see this number. I can't even see it without my reading glasses, but it's 0.37% impervious, and that's the change in impervious areas here in St. George. This is a great resource. It's called the Maine Public Water Tracking Network, and I pulled up several different screenshots, and this is showing Knox County, and now I actually am going to pull out my reading glasses. So this is showing arsenic, and you can see up here in the upper corner, we've got Camden is much higher. We go down to Owl's Head. Owl's Head does have a few issues with a few different contaminants, including PFAS because of the airport. We go down to Union, Rockport, South Thomaston is this number, Appleton, Hope, going down. Way down here is St. George. So this is the amount of arsenic that are in groundwater that and in wells that has been recorded. So our numbers are lower than the rest of the state. There are actually maps of the whole state. I'm really impressed with how much time and effort Maine has put into these maps. Anywhere else that you live during the rest of the year, look on your state websites, because you probably will have some maps for arsenic and things like radon, mercury, things like that. Unfortunately, arsenic's a big problem for us because of that bedrock. It's very, very common. Both uranium and arsenic are just common elements in the metamorphic rock, which is volcanic. This next one is manganese. Manganese is kind of a big thing, and we'll see that in a few well samples here in just a second. So once again, using my readers, Owl's Head is at the very top. Then we've got Rockport and Camden. That makes sense when you think about there being more impervious sites and a lot of great granite there. There's Friendship, Hope, South Thomaston's right here, Washington, Union, Appleton, Cushing, Warren, and then St. George. St. George is actually higher. It's right here, which is probably directly related to the granite industry. So this is for manganese. Manganese does have some issues for some people. It does have some health effects, not crazy ones, but all of these, you can look up about 10 different contaminants of concern there on the state site. Here's a beautiful drawing, and geologists actually are great at drawing beautiful things. This is showing all the changes in bedrock throughout the state of Maine. So wherever you live in Maine, you can look see what the bedrock is, and you'll get an idea of what chemicals and what constituents and minerals might be a problem for you. I live in Waldoboro, so I have very different bedrock than you all have here. the recharge rate in Maine. So we have a pretty decent recharge rate. That's how quickly our groundwater can recover. So that's how many inches of rain falls and then how quickly that groundwater can bounce back. And most of this recharge rate is around 20 to 30 inches. And so that's pretty healthy. It's much better than most of the American West. It's not anything to be concerned with. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks. That's most of the chemistry lesson is done. But these are some practical tips and trips for when you move back into your home at the beginning of summer, or for anyone you talk to that's been out of your home for a while. Make sure to let your water run at least 10 minutes. Be aware of drought conditions or any changes in watering or car washing or usage of water. I would say about 45% of the United States at any given time is under a regulation for water use. I would recommend getting your water tested at least once every 3 years, just like Dave said, preferably once a year, and you'll see why here in a few minutes. Know how deep your well is. Take care of your septic. Know where it is, and pump your holding tank. At Herring Gut and at my own home, I pump once a year. What you put on your lawn may end up in your drinking water or surrounding ocean or pond. And don't forget, for many people, the iron and copper and lead could be coming from your pipes. A lot of us live in older homes. We don't have PVC pipes. So a lot of what actually dissolves in the water is from slightly acidic water and from your pipes. So be aware of what kind of pipes you have. And there are programs like Dave showed that sometimes will help you replace the pipes. That was the big problem in Flint. They pumped a bunch of water from a river that was different acidity, and it ruined all the pipes in Flint. In the case of bacterial contamination from stagnant water, you can use bleach like Dave showed you, but you must rinse it out very thoroughly. And this usually involves, I had to shock my own well 3 times when I bought my house in Waldoboro. You had to run the water in multiple faucets for about an hour. So it's a tremendous amount of water you have to put through there to get rid of that chlorine. You do not want to be drinking chlorine bleach. You can use a series of filters on your house to reduce anything from metals to excess salts to radionuclides. Figure out if you have hard or soft water, and make sure whatever treatment you're using does not make your water a lot harder or a lot softer, because you could fix one problem and release a different problem. So all treatment systems typically tend to soften water, which is fine. We've got very hard water, but don't overdo it. This is one of those times where less is more. Hard water contains high levels of dissolved minerals. Actually, I prefer drinking it. I'm not a huge fan of salt water. It tastes better to us because it has those minerals. Soft water has a lower concentration of those minerals. You can really tell the difference if you are trying to wash your hair. Soft water, it takes a long time to get soap out of your hair. Hard water, that soap comes out quickly. But hard water causes scale and reduces soap effectiveness. Consider who's living in your household. Do you need greater control? Do you have children or pregnant women that need more protection? If so, when you look at your water well results, you need to keep that in mind. Water itself is naturally acidic because it's coming through the clouds and it's going through a bunch of carbon dioxide. And so when you collect rainwater, it's typically about 5 or 5.5 pH. Groundwater is around 6 to 6.5. I was surprised the state flags it if it's under 6.5. I would not worry about water that was below 6. Think about contributing factors, think about, and you'll see here in a second, just being close to the airport and Owl's Head made a difference between PFAS or no PFAS. So think about where you're close to. Obviously, landfills, unlined landfills can be a problem. Large septic systems. Road runoff here can be a big problem for us. If you have a very shallow well, we use a lot of salt in our roads. So that can really be a contributing factor. If you're collecting your own water at home to test it, which you can do, be careful doing it. I might actually share a video with everyone on how to collect water. You don't want to measure yourself. So you want to make sure you haven't used anything like sunscreen or anything and that your hands are out of the way. So you need to follow the instructions to a T. I would say 20% of all well water testing I've seen done, if it's done by the private homeowner, ends up being slightly contaminated. It's not your fault. You're not trained to collect 5,000 bottles of water. If you are testing your house, I would test a couple of different faucets in your house, especially if you're trying to run down an offensive pipe. You know, you're trying to figure out, you get a crazy water, reading, and you're like, wow, that's really high. Try different areas of your house to see if there's something that's causing that. So most components are below detectable level. And I'll share some results here in a second. Almost everything I looked at was all green checks and a lot of very low numbers because we are not near large industrial areas. This would be very different if we were in Rumford or Lewiston, areas like that. We're far away from most industry, large amounts of agriculture, lots of impervious surfaces. So our well water results look great. Most of the numbers I looked at, I just looked at about 5 or 6 sets of numbers, including the Port Clyde, some numbers that had been collated. And there wasn't a whole lot of variation between locations, which I found really interesting. We do have higher calcium, manganese, sodium, and calculated hardness, which is calcium to calcium carbonate. So here are the numbers with nobody's names attached. And you'll see I'm also doing at the bottom, I'm doing closed captioning for people that might not hear my low voice. So that should be recorded too. So here are the numbers I got from Spruce Head, Tenets Harbor in 2024, Ratcliffe Island, Tenets Harbor in 2025. And the reason I'm including that is that second measurement a year later, the exact same well failed radon and lead testing. So both of those numbers were alarming. And so if you can afford it, I would test yearly. Or try every 2 years. And if you don't see any variance, I'm not sure I'd wait every 3 years. And then I got numbers from St. George, from basically off of Hart's Neck area on the eastern shore, kind of close to the ocean. So you can see the calcium here was kind of high. You know, our calcium numbers run higher. We have a lot of calcium here. We have a lot of limestone, except for St. George on this eastern shore, that was low. Here are the manganese numbers, and so we had some that were non-detectable. Anything that has this little, caret here shows that it's below the detectability. But then we had some that were, 2 or 3 or 4 orders of magnitude higher. I flagged these with an asterisk if they were higher than the EPA recommends. So manganese can affect how you absorb vitamins. It can affect some of your dietary use of, some intestinal work. It's not horrible. It's more of an aesthetic issue. If you have a lot of black spots on your porcelain or see a lot of brown on some of your things, sometimes that's from manganese. A little bit of manganese is good. A lot is not good. Sodium can be a problem if you're taking heart medicine. So if you have to lower your sodium input and you're doing a great job taking your medicine, but you've got a lot of sodium in your water, then you're hurting yourself. Sodium, thankfully, is easy to remove, so is manganese. So some of these sodium numbers are a little high. None of them are flagged, but they're creeping up there, and part of that's because we're also near the ocean, so there's a lot of salt water surrounding us. That salt water gets lifted up from the ocean, lofted over us, and actually falls down on the land. So some of that sodium can be from there and some from the bedrock. Chloride is definitely typically from the ocean. Tenets Harbor had 93 milligrams per liter and 150. This is areas close to the ocean, so you're going to have more chloride because there's more sodium chloride. Magnesium comes from the bedrock. Some of these numbers are a little bit high. You can see how similar all these are, though. These are separated by many miles. Once again, though, this one area close to the east shore didn't have any magnesium at all. I've seen both iron and lead all over the place. Some iron is non-detectable. The limit in your drinking water is 0.3 milligrams per liter. Iron can interfere with hemostasis and with things in your system. Obviously, some people take iron pills, so some of it's good. But this level all the way out here, 1.47, that is way above the EPA limit of 0.3. So iron, thankfully, is easy to remove. It's a pretty large molecule. It's easy to get it to react with different types of filters, so it's inexpensive to remove. Calculated hardness, I just recorded this because everyone's hardness was actually kind of high, which shows that we all have a high mineral content because we all are sitting on top of bedrock, right? We're not in a sandy area. We're not in a super loamy area where you'd have totally different types of readings. And our pH here in different wells ranged from 5.54 and 5.83, which once again, I flagged because the state flagged them. I would drink this all day. It wouldn't bother me at all. pH is, but the state average is 6.5 to 8.5. 8.5 is actually a little on the high side. So in this case, these are more acidic. And once again, that's closer to what rainwater is. So what does it indicate? If you've got calcium and manganese, those are hard water. That means you've got minerals like limestone and dolomite. Many areas of Maine have soft water. Some areas have enough mineral-rich bedrock to cause some high hardness. It causes scale, reduces soup lather, and can cause dry hair and dry skin. And like I said, they can be beneficial, but too much of a good thing is just too much. Manganese is in your bedrock. It's aesthetic. It changes the taste. High concentrations can hurt your nervous system. And when you get this copy of this presentation, all of these numbers have links to resources. So I did try to document, as a scientist should, all of the things I'm telling you. So sodium's natural, but if it exceeds calcium manganese levels, it can indicate that you're over softening your water, you're too close to the ocean, or you've got some septic system effluent getting in there, or some road salt. It can actually taste salty at a certain point, and like I mentioned, just if you're on a low sodium diet, stay away from that. So some quick recommendations. Test for chloride. If sodium is high, check your chloride to see if it's road salt or septic. So you're trying to eliminate, you don't want to see one number and then like rebuild your whole septic system when it was coming from the road. So going back to that big crazy picture with all the different sources, it helps to understand those. Check for other metals. So when I looked at all these results, if I saw one metal was high, I looked for other metals to see if they were all combined. Areas with high mineral content in Maine can sometimes have elevated arsenic, and I'm going to show you some arsenic numbers. And treatment, a water softener can help with many of these. Though manganese, you have to have a special filtration. Caveats about water softening: don't overdo it. Some states actually ban water softening because too much soft water can really impact surface water and cause environmental damage. So California, Texas, Connecticut, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Arizona, and New Mexico all have limitations or bans on water softening. So go easy on it. When I looked at Port Clyde Water District, the volatile organic carbon, those are the scary things. Most of them are very low. Those are things like benzene and 1,1-trichloroethylene and other things they make great movies about. The only things that were a little high were chloroform and bromodichloromethane. And these can come from the remnants of chlorination from disinfection or faint septic systems. So remember we were talking about go a little easy when you can shock your well, but remember that chlorine can get into the groundwater and actually release some of these volatile things. The number one thing that hurt people in Flint was overchlorination. That was actually worse than the lead in their pipes for their medical well-being. Coliforms, all the coliforms that I looked at, and I looked at about 2 years of coliforms, and they were all 0, as they should be. If you got coliforms in your well, something's gone horribly, horribly wrong, and that's when you do have to go get your bottle of bleach and shock it. You never want to have coliforms in drinking water. It did show lead levels between 2.8 and 4.1. That's still below the level of treatment, but it's something to be aware of. So all public water systems are required to regularly sample and test their water, and so both Tennants Harbor and Port Clyde do that, and these are the things that they look for. In the news, you've all heard about PFAS. Maine has a very aggressive standard it had actually a less aggressive standard of 20 parts per trillion. The EPA is 4. There's data now available on the state PDFs that's accessible to everyone, and I'll show you what the PFAS numbers are. So we'll all pull on our reading glasses now. So this is a map that you can access directly. And there were non-detects at Port Clyde Water District, Little Learners School. Every school has to do a PFAS test. Four Winds Homeowners Association in South Thomaston, they did detect combined PFAS. That's all of the different perchlorofluorinated alkyl things that are forever chemicals that are very dangerous and have limits of close to zero of 7.42 parts per thousand at Owl's Head Elliott Apartments. So that is straight from the airport. Airports are the #1 source of that because it's from the firefighting foam. That is the primary source of PFAS. They used it forever. It does a great job putting out a fire. This is once again like Teflon and all the things that we've helped create in this world that then came back to bite us. So if you're near an airport, definitely look at that. The legal limit is no more than 4 to 10 parts per trillion. For depending on which part of the PFAS. I know Nantucket has a huge problem on PFAS by the airport. And my final slide is a bunch of resources that you can all read in your leisure, and I'll share all of this with you all. And that's it. Thank you. Sorry, I know that was a lot. And I'll put it. Well, our water is great, so I have to say. And another thing to remember is when you're getting water from a water district, you are getting groundwater. I mean, you're getting the same water with sometimes primary, secondary, or tertiary treatment. I don't think we do tertiary treatment here, but sometimes water districts are better. Where a water district is really better is that they legally have to test their water regularly. So it's kind of a easy state of mind because you know someone is really paying attention to that. And every municipality is different. I was shocked to find on Cape Cod how many water treatment systems were only primary systems, which is just settling tanks. And they didn't have any bacterial or UV treatment or anything like that. And now they've upgraded it, but all of that can be relatively expensive. And I have to say, for my own water in Waldoboro, when I moved in, it had uranium. And uranium, even though I'm not of childbearing, uranium is a no-go for most people. So I had to get a really expensive system set up at my house in Waldoboro, and we're right near a gravel pit. So, but yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. I hope that was, I mean, did that all make, I know I went kind of fast. Did that make some sense? And you will keep, please hydrate, please drink water. I don't buy bottled water either. You're just buying another city's problem. I would drink Port Clyde water all day and all night before I would spend money on bottled water. So, and don't drink alkaline water. It's a huge waste of money. So, and I have a whole diatribe about that, but go ahead.
So,
And I'll
when
tiptoe.
you call somebody like Haskell to have your water tested, there are options.
Yeah.
You could get this test that costs, I forget what, $125, or you can get a bunch more things for $250. Can you talk about the reasons for doing the more extensive testing?
I would do the more extensive tests every 3 to 5 years and do the simple one. And Dave talked about that. There's the simple one that's nitrate, salinity, looking for coliforms, looking for things that will kill you right away. You know, the top 10, you know, like nitrate, if it gets up to 10 milligrams per liter, nitrate is very common in fertilizers and it comes from the atmosphere. That's inexpensive. That's usually a $50 test. I would go up a level and get all the trace metals for us here, especially because uranium and all the metals are such a problem. I think the VOCs like PFAS are really very small problem for us, so I wouldn't worry about the trichlorobenzene, BPAs, the 120 different volatile organic carbons. I had another slide in here talking about VOCs in detail, but I thought that would kill you all. Because it's very, involved. I wouldn't worry about that based on where we are. So typically look at where you live and what you think you're concerned about. So once again, the primary ones I try to do once a year if you can afford it, and then go do the trace metals and heavy metals like every 2 or 3 years, and then I wouldn't worry about the VOCs unless you really are worried about it. And now, if you're having medical problems that you can't track down, one of the first things you should do is check your water quality. You know, check your radon in your home. If you've got things that are bothering you and you're not sure why, you always check your diet and your water, right? Not to scare people. We have great water. So, another question. Yes.
How much copper do you pick up from copper piping?
A lot. Like, well, it depends on how acidic the water is and how old the copper piping is. And there's a big difference between hot water and cold water. So hot water that's really acidic is going to leach a fair amount of copper. Cold water that is more basic, that's closer to 7, is going to leach less. So copper wants to move into acidic water.
Could you repeat those questions, please, when they come up? I never heard that question.
I'm so sorry, and it was a great question. So she was asking how much do you need to worry about copper in your pipes? How often does that get extracted into your drinking water? And most modern pipes actually are coated with like a plastic laminate that helps keep the copper from leaching. But there's a bigger worry if you have super hot water or very acidic water. So those two things are going to leach more copper. Yeah. Oh, and wait for the microphone.
Can you use the mic, please?
Sorry.
Oh, that's
A follow-up question. Scaling, does that take place with copper piping and protect you from copper leaching into the drinking water?
That's really a great question. Yeah, scaling will eventually fill up your whole copper pipe. I mean, your pipes can get completely impinged, but scaling would prevent you from leaching copper.
And
that's a great question. That's like
is it a good idea to replace your copper piping with PVC? Does PVC have problems?
That's another great question. PVC does have problems, especially if you have any chlorine in your water or if your water's super acidic. It has less problems than copper. Well, copper only has one problem, the copper that you're ingesting. So you could use copper pipes and use a Brita filter or something that's filtering out that copper at the end source. So that's one option you could do instead of replacing all your pipes, is have some kind of filtration, even something as simple as a Brita filter, because copper also is pretty large and easy to filter. PVC has some things coming off of it, typically not as much at the temperature of well water. Our well water on average is going to be about 45 to 55 degrees. Our wells are down deep enough, they're not going to get super hot. If you've ever lived anywhere in the south and used a well, you can find out those wells get up to like 80 degrees. But PVC can leach a few things, but less things than copper. So there's a variety of spectrum of things that can be concerning.
About copper, I didn't think copper was toxic. I thought our bodies eliminated copper.
Some amount of copper can be toxic. It's lumped in with manganese and magnesium and the other macronutrients, where a little bit of it's fine, but you can have copper toxicity. It's really interesting with plants. A little bit of copper is great for plants. A whole lot kills plants right away. That's why they often would, it's kind of horrifying, but in order to clean pipes and septic systems, they would often inject copper into those systems in order to kill roots in plants that were breaking into the pipes. And so they would then contaminate all the groundwater, and that was very commonly done, and still is kind of done occasionally. Something I don't recommend. Copper sulfate, for instance, is used to clear pipes, and if you think your groundwater is pretty shallow, I wouldn't use that. Is there questions online? No? Okay.
I have a question.
Go, yeah, we can hear you.
Can we get copies of these slides?
Yes. I'm going to provide this directly to Erin and to Jane, so it can be on the website. And I think
thank you.
You're welcome. I'll be coming back to do the one in the fall, talking about surface water and ocean water.
Yeah, and I put my email in the chat as well if people online want to request the Zoom or the slides, or if you want to put your email in the chat, then I'll make sure you get it as well.
I think it's worth pointing out that we have been told by the Tennants Harbor Water District that they have tested for PFAS and there were no issues at all.
And it shows up when you go, and I'm sorry I had to go through some of that quickly. When you go onto my copy, you can actually click on each of those municipalities. You can do the whole state and click and say who's having trouble with manganese or arsenic, and click every single individual location. And as far as PFAS, you can click every single nursery school, every single school, and see what their readings are, which is awesome. So all those things that I put in there are clickable from the state, and I'm really grateful to Maine because that is a lot of work. What I couldn't find, there's a couple of simple things that I couldn't find. I could not find a map of all of Maine that had all the septic systems, and I've talked to Tim and a couple of other guys, and we don't have that locked down. In some states, you can do an overlay that shows what areas are served by public water or have public sewer and what areas are septic, and they don't. Maybe Maine would be all brown and just all septic, but if you go onto those websites, and I listed several of them on there, they're fascinating, and it's the best way to absorb this. I just threw literally, like an entire, Chem 101 class at you. But if you kind of dig through those, I at least am more comforted once I know what's going on in my water and in my yard, and that helps me make decisions on what I'm going to use or not use, and where I'm going to live or not live. Yeah, Jack.
Do you know what the quality of the water is at the spring at Wiley's Corner?
I am dying to test that. That actually, I think Jane and I will get together, and I might personally even pay for that one. I don't know.
Because there is a test posted there all the time.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, but if we went down there and took a picture, it would have like A&L or
Right.
Haskell or something. That's all I need to do is whoever's at the spring next getting water, shoot me a picture. And I don't mind reviewing. I do review people's well water for them all the time. I don't mind doing it. I am, I'm a medium professional. I don't get paid to do it. I don't accept money for it, so don't sue anyone based on what I say. But, I will be serious in how I review it and make sure that I'm not giving you, totally bogus information. But I'm happy to look at. If you all come tomorrow with 100 tests, then I've never said that. Yes, I can. Yeah, and the more of us that do this, I want to really thank the 4 or 5 people that were willing to share. I think that these kind of things are really helpful, and I would love for the town of St. George if we can do it in a way where we, make it anonymous, but just have it in general swaths so you don't know exactly whose house. I haven't seen any information that made me say, oh, I would not buy that house. There's nothing and there are plenty of areas around the country where you would not want to buy that house. If you find evidence, for instance, if you're looking to shop and buy a home and you see obvious evidence of septic infiltration or PFAS, then I would be thinking twice on things like that. I love that you do. You have great questions. You should be teaching this.
We have a burn building in St. George.
A what building?
It's called a burn building. It was constructed to be used by firefighters for practice.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was first proposed, I was curious about what they would be using in the way of firefighting foams in that building,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been known for some years that these are problems around airports, military bases. So I wonder if here in St. George there's some protection around that building, and if it's being used and if fire foam is being used.
That's great. I don't know, but it's good that you mentioned it. In fact, in front of EMS folks, in front of Jane, it's possible that they're using that. That it is, provided to firefighters for many, many years. They're cycling all that out. Most of those are illegal, but unfortunately, the word forever chemical is real. Those are chemicals that don't break down. They don't biodegrade. Once they get into soil or groundwater, it has to be excavated to remediate it. But I don't know personally. That's a good question, and we can try to find out for you.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
can
please
hear
hold
you,
for
but
just a
we have
second.
one
I'm going to let
question
him answer that.
Oh.
Thank you so much. So, a gentleman in the back who's looks like he's in charge said to I'm teasing. Said to his best ability, they've never used foam, firefighting foam, and they don't plan to use it. And things like that they wouldn't use now. So it would show up. I mean, one way to test that, if you were giving that to a student to test out, is to do groundwater sampling and do well water sampling around that building. So that's what I used to do on Nantucket, is look at areas in people's backyards, and I would measure for fertilizer and for septic systems. And I could tell if someone had had a party. You could tell the nitrogen and the phosphate. It was really scary, or had just applied Scott's Miracle-Gro. We had a question.
I must sign off. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, what do you think of using a UV light?
I think that's a great idea, actually, to have for bacterial. I mean, for groundwater, we're using one now at Herring Gut for our fish. So if you're doing any kind of surface water work, you would absolutely want to use a bacterial UV light. It can't hurt to have UV protection. So UV light kills all the bacteria that's coming into a system. So usually it's put first in line, and it goes through the UV light, and then it goes through a sediment filter, and then a filter for your trace metals, and a filter for your heavy metals, and then through a charcoal filter to get rid of your organics. So that's why you have all those different filters. And when we filter water at Herring Gut, we use all of those things. Most groundwater should not have bacteria. So bacteria doesn't have many ways to get into your groundwater unless something's flooded. Dave did a great job of showing that's a big danger if you have floodwaters that overwhelm your well. But it can't hurt. Bacteria is pretty insidious, and a lot of people suffer from bacterial issues that shouldn't have to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, is that all good? All right. Thank you guys very much.
Aren't we lucky to have Sarah at Herring Gut and providing all of this information to us? So thank you to both of our speakers. And also, Sarah's on our resilience committee, and obviously, as we think about the ocean rising, and we have 125 miles of coastline in St. George, lots of us may have infrastructure that becomes threatened. So these are things we'll have to think about for the future. So very grateful to you. Thanks everybody for coming.